The silence of the midnight trading floor was a living thing, thick and heavy, pressing down on you. Every workstation, every monitor, every blinking indicator light lay dormant, entombed in a fine, almost imperceptible layer of dust. The vast, cavernous space, once a roaring crucible of ambition and greed, now hummed with nothing but the low thrum of the building's distant HVAC system and the dull, rhythmic beat of your own heart. You sat amidst the husks of these dead screens, a lone figure in a forgotten kingdom. The ergonomic chair, once a symbol of prestige, now felt like a throne of exile, its leather cracked, its pneumatic lift long since failed. Cole. That was your name. The air was cool, carrying the faint metallic scent of ozone and the stale odor of forgotten coffee. You'd made this place your sanctuary, or perhaps your prison, for the better part of 3 years. After the collapse, after the headlines, after her. The details of the tragedy that had unmade you were a constant dull ache beneath your ribs, a phantom limb you still tried to reach for. It wasn't just the financial ruin, not just the spectacular fall from grace that had seen your name dragged through every gutter press. You lived off the grid, quite literally, in this corporate cadaver. Your few remaining possessions were scattered around the central cluster of desks. A worn sleeping bag, a camping stove, a stack of dog-eared paperbacks, and a small, battery-powered radio, an anachronism in this temple of digital decay. The hum of the city outside was a distant, irrelevant murmur, a world you had consciously chosen to detach from. News cycles, market fluctuations, political scandals. They were all just noise, impotent vibrations against the thick, soundproofed windows. It was a meaningless exercise, a way to keep your fingers moving, to pretend there was still a purpose to your existence. Then, a sudden jarring sound. It wasn't the city outside. It was closer, sharper. The radio. You froze, your hand hovering over the keyboard. It was the emergency broadcast frequency, usually reserved for natural disasters or civil unrest. This was different. This was urgent. Repeat, a major incident at the Sterling Gallery. Authorities have confirmed a high-profile art heist, believed to have occurred approximately 30 minutes ago. Initial reports indicate multiple fatalities, including gallery security and at least one civilian. The perpetrators remain at large. This is an ongoing and extremely fluid situation. The city is on high alert. Police are urging residents to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity. The voice crackled, then faded back into a tense, low-frequency hum. You stared at the radio, a cheap plastic box that had just screamed a terrifying reality into your carefully constructed bubble of isolation. Multiple fatalities. An art heist. Not just a robbery, but a bloodbath. The Sterling Gallery. You knew that place. Knew its security protocols, its priceless collection, its vulnerabilities. A ghost of a memory, sharp and unwelcome, pricked at the edges of your mind. You'd consulted for them once, years ago, before everything went to hell. Outside, distant sirens began to wail, a rising chorus of alarm that pierced the midnight air, growing louder, closer. They were no longer just background noise. They were an urgent summons, a terrifying clarion call that echoed not just through the streets of the city, but through the very core of your carefully guarded solitude. Something had ripped through the fabric of your forgotten world, and for the first time in years, you felt a tremor. Now it was charged, a vacuum waiting to be filled by something you knew. Deep down, you couldn't escape. The incessant jarring ring of your burner phone, a device you hadn't touched in over a year, ripped through the quiet of your apartment. You let it ring, once, twice, a third time. The caller was persistent. A name you hadn't seen in years flashed across the screen. Thorne C.I., Seth James Thorne. ambitious, by the book, and utterly devoid of humor. "Cole," Thorne's voice was clipped, devoid of pleasantries. "Took you long enough. We have a situation, a serious one. And you're needed." You closed your eyes, a heavy sigh escaping your lips. "Needed? I'm retired, Seth. You know that. This isn't a request, Cole. It's an order. Consider yourself reactivated. The scene is the old Sophie Capital trading floor, downtown. Now." The line went dead. You stood there, the phone still pressed to your ear, the weight of a past you thought buried pressing down on you. You knew this was coming, eventually. Swirling red and blue lights painted the surrounding street, reflecting off the slick, rain-dampened asphalt. You pushed through the yellow tape, the familiar scent of ozone and stale fear already prickling your nostrils. Inside, the vast trading floor was a tableau of eerie stillness. Dead screens, hundreds of them, lined the desks in silent rows, reflecting the stark, unfeeling glare of emergency floodlights. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and something else. Something metallic and final. You spotted Thorne immediately, a rigid figure by the perimeter, his face etched with a frustration that bordered on fear. Beside him stood Detective Miller, a younger man whose gaze hardened the moment it landed on you. Miller had always resented your unconventional methods, your reputation. His animosity was a palpable thing, a low hum in the air. "Look who decided to grace us with his presence," Miller muttered, loud enough to be heard. "The prodigal son returns." Thorne shot Miller a warning glance but offered you no greeting. "Don't think this means anything, Cole. You're here because this is outside the usual. Don't get in my way." You ignored them both, your eyes already scanning the scene, drawn to the central cluster of activity. The trading floor was immense, a cathedral of defunct capital, and in its very heart, a single figure lay sprawled across a polished mahogany desk. As you approached, the details sharpened, each one a brushstroke in a macabre masterpiece. The victim, a man in a crisp, expensive suit, was positioned with an almost artistic precision. No sign of struggle, no overturned chairs, no scattered papers, no frantic scramble for escape. Everything was disturbingly neat. You knelt, ignoring the glares of the uniformed officers and the forensic team. The victim's face was serene, almost peaceful, his eyes open and staring blankly at the ceiling. There was no visible trauma, no blood, no obvious cause of death. It was as if he had simply ceased. Then you saw it. The signature. Nestled carefully in the victim's left hand, clutched loosely but deliberately, was a single, ancient paper ledger. Its leather cover was cracked and faded, its pages yellowed with age, a stark, anachronistic relic amidst the gleaming, dead technology of the trading floor. It was open to a specific page, and though you couldn't read the minuscule, spidery script from your angle, you could see the lines, the columns, the meticulous entries of a bygone era. And on the opposite side of the desk, perfectly centered, a single polished brass compass. Its needle spun slowly, aimlessly, as if lost in this vast, directionless space. The perpetrator hadn't just killed, they had curated. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. This was an execution, a statement, crafted by a mind as meticulous as it was malevolent. You stand amidst the silent graveyard of a midnight trading floor, the only illumination a sickly green glow from emergency lights and the faint. Each monitor, a black mirror, reflects your own grim face back at you, multiplied into an army of specters. The air, thick with the scent of stale coffee and something metallic, hums with the phantom energy of 1,000 ceased transactions that will never be completed. No struggle, no overturned furniture, just a quiet, precise end. The scene is disturbingly orderly, almost serene, save for the obvious violence. You don't look at Sterling's face or the pooling crimson on the desk. Your gaze, as always, sweeps past the obvious, settling on the small, almost imperceptible details that others invariably overlook. The absence of something, or the presence of something out of place. This time, it's not immediately apparent. You circle the desk slowly, your gloved hands clasped behind your back, your eyes dissecting the sterile environment. A half-eaten granola bar, a discarded coffee cup, a neatly stacked pile of reports. All normal. Too normal. Then you see it. Tucked neatly under a loose floor tile, almost as if placed there for you to find, is a small, ornate silver pocket watch. Not Sterling's, you know instinctively. It's too antique, too delicate for a man whose life revolved around digital milliseconds. Its hands are stopped, frozen precisely at midnight. A pocket watch, an anachronism. Just like the polished brass compass from the rival broker's office last month. Two high-stakes players, two silent, precise kills, two objects from a bygone era, deliberately placed. Or perhaps deliberately not placed, but left. Left as a signature, a mocking flourish in a world obsessed with the new. Detective Miller, his face a mask of weary professionalism, steps into your periphery. His eyes, tired and cynical, sweep over the scene, then settle on you with a familiar mix of exasperation and grudging respect. Fancy seeing you here? Thought you were on administrative leave. Or was that just wishful thinking on my part? You ignore the jab, your fingers already prying the watch from its hiding place, careful not to disturb any potential prints. It's the same, you state, your voice low, eyes still fixed on the intricate filigree of the watch. He's doing it again. Miller scoffs, running a hand over his thinning hair. Another unconventional theory, Cole? A compass. A compass found in a dead man's office. You remember how that went, don't you? The entire department, convinced you'd finally cracked. He pauses, a bitter edge to his voice. The Donovan case. The promising lead that evaporated, taking your reputation with it. This time it's a pocket watch, you counter, holding it up for him to see. Both anachronisms, both at the scene of a high-value target, both related to navigation or time, old-world ways of keeping track of things in a world of instant data. Or a coincidence, Miller retorts, his gaze dismissive. Or Sterling just had a penchant for antiques, and he dropped his lucky charm. You're seeing patterns in the static again, Cole. Like that business with the... Miller trails off, the unspoken accusation, the specific failure, hanging heavy in the sterile air. You recall the compass, its needle, spinning aimlessly, as if lost in this vast digital ocean. And now a stopped pocket watch, a deliberate halting of time, a navigation tool that doesn't navigate, a timekeeping device that doesn't keep time. It's a message, a very specific kind of message, designed for an audience who understands the subtle language of history and control. You look at the dead screens, the quiet, the precision, the lack of struggle, the targets, aggressive, cutthroat competitors, men who lived and died by the clock, by the market's direction. The method of killing is secondary. The message is primary. It's not about the blood, it's about the symbolism. He's not just killing them, Miller, you say, finally looking up, meeting his skeptical gaze. He's making a statement about control, about time, about direction. He's showing them that their modern tools, their speed, their supposed mastery are nothing against his old world order. And no one else sees it. Miller shakes his head slowly, a deep sigh escaping his lips. What I see, Cole, is you on the edge again. And frankly, after what happened with the Donovan case, I'm not sure we can afford your insights right now. The brass is already breathing down my neck about the pattern, so glaringly obvious to you, remains invisible to them, obscured by their procedural blindness, and by the ghost of your own past mistakes. The stopped watch in your gloved hand feels heavy, a silent, ticking bomb of information that only you seem to hear. The killer isn't just taking lives. He's orchestrating a symphony of forgotten instruments, and you're the only one who recognizes the tune. Dead screens, hundreds of them, reflected the faint blue glow of the crime scene lights like a field of frozen, unblinking eyes. The air, usually thick with the frantic energy of ambition and fear, now hung heavy with the sterile scent of antiseptic and the metallic tang of dried blood. You moved through the tableau, a ghost among the living, your senses heightened, searching for the discordant note. A young woman named Miller gave you a wide berth, her suspicion a palpable wall between you, but her curiosity occasionally flickered in her eyes. She was good, but not good enough to see what you saw. Not yet. Your gaze drifted over the main console, where the victim, a mid-level analyst, had been found. His death was brutal, precise. The killer hadn't just ended a life. They had made a statement that was beginning to feel eerily personal. The official report would note the chaos, the overturned chairs, the scattered papers, a staged struggle. But you knew better. The true message wasn't in the obvious destruction. You knelt beside the console, ignoring the uniformed officer who shifted uncomfortably nearby. Your fingers, calloused from years of gripping a service weapon, now traced the cool, smooth surface of the desk. The killer had left no prints, a professional. But professionals still leave traces. Beneath the main monitor, where a cluster of wires snaked into the floor, your eyes caught it. Not a dropped item, not a stray fiber, but something deliberately placed, subtly integrated into the scene. Wedged almost imperceptibly between the base of the monitor stand and a thick bundle of power cables was a small, tarnished silver charm. It was no bigger than your thumbnail, shaped like a stylized raven's wing, meticulously etched with a single looping symbol that resembled a broken infinity sign. Your breath hitched. The air in your lungs suddenly felt like shards of glass. The world, which had moments ago been a muted palette of gray and blue, exploded into a vivid, horrifying crimson. No, not possible. But it was. The charm. The symbol. It was unmistakable. You knew that symbol. You had seen it before, in your nightmares, plastered across crime scene photos, carved into the flesh of the dead. The raven. The case that had ended your career. The one that had shattered your life into irreparable fragments. The case that had taken everything from you. Your badge, your reputation, the woman you loved. The serial killer who had vanished without a trace, leaving a trail of bodies and a gaping wound in your soul. You felt the familiar crushing weight of guilt, a phantom limb that throbbed with renewed agony. For years, you had carried the burden of failure, the faces of the victims haunting your waking hours and twisting your dreams into grotesque parodies of justice. You had been so close, so agonizingly close to catching him. Your hand trembled as you reached for the charm, but stopped yourself. Contamination. Even now, the old instinct screamed at you. But the urge to touch it, to confirm its horrifying reality, was almost overwhelming. Miller approached cautiously. "Find something, Cole?" Her voice was flat, devoid of the usual edge of suspicion, replaced by a nascent curiosity. You didn't answer immediately, always one step ahead. And now, this. Here, after all these years. "Cole?" Miller pressed, her brow furrowing. You finally looked up, your eyes meeting hers. "This charm," you rasped, your voice rough. "It's not part of the victim's belongings. It's too clean, too deliberately placed." She squinted, leaning in. "A souvenir? Or a calling card?" "A calling card," you confirmed, the words tasting like ash. "And it belongs to someone I know." The truth, stark and brutal, slammed into you with the force of a physical blow. The current perpetrator wasn't just another killer. They were connected. The possibility that the monster you had failed to capture, the one who had destroyed your life, was back, taunting you, was almost unbearable. It was personal. Deeply, horrifyingly personal. The ghost of your past had not only returned, but it had laid claim to your present, dragging you back into the very nightmare you had spent years trying to escape. This time, you wouldn't fail. This time, the raven would not slip away. But the cost, you knew, would be immeasurable. This wasn't just another case anymore. You stood at the threshold of the cavernous space, the twin beams of your flashlight cutting through the gloom. The midnight trading floor, once a cacophony of ambition and despair, was now a tomb. Rows upon rows of monitors, usually ablaze with flickering data, were black and lifeless, reflecting your own grim visage back at you like 1,000 vacant eyes. Cole? As voice, distant and wary, cut through your thoughts. You barely registered it. Your gaze was fixed on the center of the floor, where a single powerful spotlight, not part of the building's usual lighting, cast a harsh circle of illumination. Within the circle of light, a scene was meticulously arranged, a tableau of calculated cruelty. Thousands of shredded stock market printouts, the detritus of financial lives, had been painstakingly gathered and scattered across the polished floor. They weren't random. They formed a crude yet unmistakable image. A broken hourglass, its sand forever still. And beneath it, spelled out in larger, carefully placed fragments, a single devastating word: failure. This wasn't just for the police. This was for you. The hourglass, the word. Then, with a low hum that vibrated through the floorboards, one of the immense central display screens, a behemoth that should have been utterly inert, flickered to life. For a moment, it displayed only static, a furious storm of white noise. Then, the static coalesced, forming text, stark white against the black. Cole, it read, each letter seeming to burn itself into your retina. Below your name, a single devastating line. You forgot her, but I didn't. July 14th, 2008. The date, the precise, agonizing date. It wasn't just a reminder. It was a reenactment, a deliberate plunge of a knife into the wound that had never truly healed. July 14th, 2008. The day the world had tilted on its axis. The day you'd lost everything. The day you'd failed to protect the one person who mattered most. Your vision blurred. The trading floor, the dead screens, the other detectives, all receded. All that existed was the glowing text, the mocking date, and the memory it ripped from its shallow grave. The acrid smell of burnt wiring, the frantic screams, the crushing weight of debris, the desperate, futile search. What is it? His hand was on your shoulder, but you shrugged it off, the touch feeling like an alien intrusion. You were locked in a private hell, the antagonist's cruel masterpiece playing out only for you. This wasn't a message. It was a declaration of war. A public shaming. The antagonist wasn't just solving a puzzle. They were dismantling you, piece by agonizing piece, exposing your deepest vulnerabilities to the world. They knew. They knew everything, and they were using it to break you. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a personal vendetta, a duel with a phantom who knew your every weakness. Your professional detachment shattered, splintering into 1,000 shards of rage and desperation. You felt the edges of your control fraying, the tight leash you kept on your emotions snapping. Your hands clenched into fists, nails digging into your palms. This wasn't just about catching a killer. It was about silencing the ghost that haunted your past. About proving to yourself and to the monster who reveled in your pain that you weren't broken. You turned away from the screen, the glowing words etched permanently behind your eyelids. Your jaw was set, your eyes burning with a dangerous fire. You were no longer just on a case, no matter the cost. The stakes had just become immeasurably higher, and your own soul was now on the table. Dead screens stretched into the gloom, their obsidian surfaces reflecting the distant glow of emergency lights like the unblinking eyes of forgotten gods. Each one a black mirror, holding the ghost of countless transactions, a silent testament to the empire of data that had once hummed here. You stood amidst them, the phantom words from the screen you just walked away from still burning behind your eyelids. Your jaw was set, a dangerous fire simmering in your eyes. What you'd seen wasn't just a lead, it was a wound, a tear in the fabric of what you thought you knew. But now, in this vast, empty cathedral of commerce, the pieces began to shift, rearranging themselves into a far more sinister picture. You reached into your jacket, pulling out a small, encrypted drive. Standard issue, but with a few custom modifications you'd made years ago. You'd always been meticulous, a habit born of necessity in a world where information was currency. Plugging it into a portable terminal you'd brought, its small, self-contained screen was a stark contrast to the slumbering giants around you. You scrolled through the data you'd managed to extract earlier, cross-referencing it with your own personal archives. A lifetime of observations, anomalies, and the kind of fringe intelligence that never made it into official reports. The heists. They were bold, precise, and financially significant. Everyone assumed profit was the motive, a straightforward grab for cash. Even you had. But something about the patterns, the specific targets, the methodologies, it never quite added up. The financial gain, while substantial, often seemed secondary to something else, something less tangible. You paused, your finger hovering over a series of seemingly routine system logs from the last targeted financial institution. They detailed standard protocol breaches, the kind that would be expected in a sophisticated cyber attack. But there, buried deep within a cascade of encrypted timestamps and IP addresses, was a faint, almost imperceptible digital signature. It wasn't a hacker's mark, not a known malware footprint. It was something else. A ghost in the machine. You'd seen it before, years ago, in a different context. A unique, highly specialized encryption algorithm developed for internal, secure communications within certain government agencies. An algorithm designed not just to protect data, but to control its flow, to authenticate its origin with absolute certainty. It was an arcane signature, almost impossible to detect unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. And now, here it was again. Not on one log, but subtly woven into the fabric of every major breach associated with the recent string of heists. It wasn't about stealing money. It was about control. The heists were a smokescreen. The financial losses were a distraction, a loud, public spectacle designed to draw attention away from the real target. Specific, highly sensitive data. Not just any data, but information that granted immense leverage. Financial vulnerabilities of key institutions, political secrets of high-ranking officials, the kind of intelligence that could destabilize entire markets or bring down careers with a single leak. The profit was merely the cost of doing business, a convenient cover for the true motive. The acquisition of power, built on an empire of secrets. You pulled up your old cross-reference database, a private network of known government system architectures and their unique digital fingerprints. You ran the signature. The result flashed on your small screen, stark and damning. The algorithm, this unique digital signature, was directly tied to a highly compartmentalized secure network used by a specific high-ranking official within the national intelligence apparatus. Not just any official, but someone with direct oversight of domestic security operations, someone with access to every major police investigation, every federal task force, someone you knew, at least by reputation. The realization hit you like a physical blow. Betrayal. It wasn't just a rogue agent or a criminal mastermind on the outside. This was an inside job, orchestrated from the highest echelons of power. The police force, the very institutions meant to protect, had been compromised. Then, the true horror of your situation clicked into place. You scrolled further, comparing the signature's appearance in the heist logs with something else. A series of anomalous anonymous tips and digital breadcrumbs that had, over the past few weeks, led you down specific investigative paths. Paths that had pointed to certain key pieces of evidence, certain leads you were meant to find. The same signature, subtly embedded in the metadata of those tips. You weren't just uncovering a conspiracy, you were part of it. The trail you'd been following, the evidence you'd been meticulously collecting, it wasn't leading to the mastermind. It was leading to you. The critical piece of information you'd just uncovered wasn't just a revelation of betrayal. It was the final, devastating proof that you were being set up, framed. They had used you, fed you just enough to make you chase the red herring of the heists, while subtly manipulating the evidence to point to you as the architect, the central figure in their grand scheme. By discovering the truth, you had walked right into their trap. The rules had changed. They were compromised. You were alone, a pawn in a game you hadn't even known you were playing. But now you knew the game, and you knew the players, and you knew what you had to do. You would clear your name, not by playing their game, but by burning down their empire of secrets from the inside. The dangerous fire in your eyes was no longer just anger. It was a promise. You couldn't go to the authorities. They hadn't just removed you from the case. They had made you the target. The news report, a grainy image of your face plastered next to a headline screaming, "Officer suspended, wanted for questioning an evidence tampering case," had been the final brutal confirmation. A peripheral crime? Yes, but one designed to undermine everything you stood for, to paint you as a rogue agent attempting to cover your own tracks. The irony was a punch to the gut. You were fighting to uncover the truth, and they had twisted it into a weapon against you. Your badge, your phone, your official channels all gone, severed by an unseen hand. The world you had sworn to protect had turned its back, or rather, a powerful faction within it had. You moved like a phantom through the city's underbelly, shedding the last vestiges of your official life. Your apartment was a no-go, your usual haunts too risky. Your destination was an anachronism, a relic of a bygone financial boom. The abandoned trading floor of Sterling and Vance, shuttered years ago after a scandal of its own. It was a place you'd stumbled upon years ago during an unrelated investigation, a forgotten monument to avarice and collapse. Now it was your sanctuary. You picked the lock with practiced ease, the click echoing unnaturally loud in the cavernous space. The air inside was still and stale, thick with the scent of dust and decay. Rows upon rows of dead screens, their glass surfaces reflecting the faint, sickly glow of the city outside, stood like a graveyard of ambition. Dust motes danced in the anemic light filtering through grimy windows, illuminating the ghost of 1,000 frantic deals. Spiderwebs clung to the ergonomic chairs, the keyboards coated in a fine gray film. It was the perfect place to disappear. You pulled out a burner phone you'd purchased hours ago, wiping it clean before loading it with a secure, encrypted messaging app. You had one shot at this. One person you could trust. The message was brief, coded, sent to a number you'd committed to memory years ago. A rendezvous point, a time, and a single, urgent word. Compromised. You waited, the hours stretching into an eternity. The dead screens seemed to watch you, silent judges in your new, solitary trial. Every creak of the old building, every distant rumble of traffic, sent a jolt of adrenaline through you. You were off the grid, a ghost, and the city's legitimate systems were now your enemy. Then a soft tap at the side entrance, exactly as you'd instructed. You moved with the quiet efficiency of a predator, your hand already on the grip of the unregistered firearm you now carried. The door creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a younger man, his shoulders hunched, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. It was the junior detective, the one you'd taken under your wing, the one with an unwavering belief in justice. He was green, idealistic, but fiercely loyal. He looked disheveled, clearly having come directly from a shift or a hurried exit. You pulled him inside, securing the door behind him. "They're on to me, Mark. They've framed me for evidence tampering." His face, pale in the dim light, contorted in disbelief. "But why? Who?" "The same people we were investigating. The ones at the top. They're making an example. They want to discredit me, make me look like a rogue cop so no one believes anything I say." You gestured around the desolate trading floor. "This is it, Mark. We're on our own. No badge, no backup, no official channels." He swallowed hard, his gaze sweeping over the dead screens, understanding the gravity of your words. I saw the news. They're saying you disappeared, that you're armed and dangerous. They're painting a picture. We need to paint a different one." You met his gaze, searching for any flicker of doubt. There was none, only a hardened resolve that mirrored your own. "I need you to be my eyes and ears on the inside. You're still in. You'll hear things, see things. Anything suspicious, anything out of place. Anything that ties back to the original case, or to this frame-up." "What do you need me to do?" he asked. His voice steadier now, the fear giving way to a nascent determination. "They think they've boxed me in, made me a pariah. But they forgot one thing. A cornered animal is the most dangerous." You walked to one of the dead screens, tracing a finger through the dust on its surface. "We need to find out what they planted, what they took. We need to find the real evidence. The evidence that proves my innocence and their guilt." "I'm with you, Cole. All the way." A grim smile touched your lips. "Good, because from now on, everything we do is off the books." The dead screens were no longer just a reminder of failure, but a symbol of a new beginning. The dead screens reflected your gaunt face, a mosaic of dormant power. The air was thick with the ghost of money, the lingering scent of ambition and betrayal. A grim smile still played on your lips, but it was edged with a desperate resolve. "Off the books," you'd said. And there was no turning back. Now, in this cathedral of forgotten wealth, you had to build your gallows, and, yourself, the noose. Their methods were a study in insidious control. They didn't just manipulate markets, they owned the very concept of information. They used the intricate web of global finance as their personal playground, weaving threads of influence into a tapestry of absolute power. Their weakness, however, was also their strength, their obsessive need for secrecy. Exposure was their kryptonite. A public spotlight on their machinations would shatter their carefully constructed empire. You walked the aisles, your footsteps echoing eerily. Each terminal, each server rack, held a memory, a snippet of code, a potential vulnerability. You knew this place better than anyone. You had helped build parts of it, had navigated its labyrinthine systems for years, and you knew where the bodies were buried, not literally, but in the digital sense. Old protocols, decommissioned servers, forgotten access points, the ghosts in the machine that still held residual power. Your mind raced, sifting through years of accumulated knowledge. They operated with surgical precision, leaving no discernible trace. But no system, no matter how sophisticated, was entirely without its blind spots, its legacy vulnerabilities. You remembered an obscure, rarely used data conduit, a back channel designed for emergency transfers that had been overlooked in subsequent security upgrades. It was a digital cul-de-sac, a forgotten pathway that still connected to the main grid, a perfect place to plant a seed of chaos. You wouldn't expose them directly. That would be suicide, a single futile cry in the wilderness. Instead, you would create the illusion of imminent exposure. You would craft a phantom data package, a digital bomb, that would appear to be on the verge of detonating, threatening to reveal the very core of their financial manipulations to the world. This wasn't about a random leak. This was about a targeted, undeniable threat, one that would force their hand. The package would contain a meticulously constructed narrative of their key illicit operations, the shell companies, the manipulated stock prices, the ghost transactions that siphoned billions. It would be coded with specific identifiers, digital fingerprints that only they would recognize as legitimate, as truly dangerous. And most importantly, it would appear to be originating from you, Cole. You needed to make them believe you were about to pull the trigger, that you possessed the key to unleashing this storm. You would plant this bomb in that forgotten conduit, activating a timed release sequence that would appear to be irreversible. The system would register the threat, track its origin to you, and signal an impending catastrophic data breach. A breach that would tear their carefully constructed world apart. Once they detected the threat, once they traced it back to your digital signature, they wouldn't send a warning. They would send an executioner. They would come for you, swift and silent, to neutralize the threat before it went public. You would be the bait, dangling on the precipice of exposure, daring them to take the hook. Your fingers moved over a dust-laden keyboard, waking a long dormant terminal. You began to work, a phantom programmer in a graveyard of data, weaving the digital threads of your own demise. Or perhaps their undoing. The clock on the terminal display, a relic of a bygone era, ticked relentlessly. It was dangerous, reckless even. But you knew their methods, their weaknesses. They would react. They had to. And when they did, you would be waiting. You finished the upload, watching the progress bar crawl to 100%. The digital bomb was armed, its fuse lit. Now, you just had to ensure the tripwire was set, a subtle signal that would scream your name into their hidden networks, drawing them in. You had set the trap. You had become the bait. All that was left was to wait for the predators to come for their meal. The grim smile returned, this time, a promise. This was your play. And the game had just begun. You leaned back, the amber light illuminating the sweat on your brow. Then, another sound. Footsteps. Slow, measured, echoing across the polished concrete. You always were a tenacious one. "You've been busy," you retorted, your voice steady despite the tremor you felt deep in your chest. "Busier than I ever imagined." Elias chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Imagination, Cole, is a luxury for those who don't understand how the world truly works. We just facilitate it. You pushed off the desk, stepping forward, the vast expanse of dead screens separating you. Each monitor was a black mirror reflecting the amber glow, a silent testament to the vast, dormant power around you. Facilitate? You call murder and market manipulation facilitation? The collapse of the pension funds? Collateral damage, necessary adjustments. The system, Cole, is a living thing. Sometimes it needs a surgeon's hand, sometimes a butcher's. He paused, his gaze unwavering. You remember the Sterling case, don't you? The Sterling case. A high-profile embezzlement that had been closed, but always felt incomplete. You'd been the lead detective, the one who'd taken the fall for its messy conclusion. What about it? You demanded, your jaw tight. He was diverting funds, yes, but not for himself. He was attempting to expose a much larger network, a network we were building. The truth began to coalesce, a sickening puzzle clicking into place. You set him up to take the fall for a fraction of what he uncovered. And then you made sure I was the one to close the case, burying any loose ends. Merrick offered a small, grim smile. You were perfect. Dedicated, principled, and utterly predictable. You followed the evidence we planted, every breadcrumb leading exactly where we wanted. Sterling went to prison, the real money disappeared, and you, Cole, were lauded as the man who brought him down. A hero, conveniently blind to the true scale. The betrayal burned hotter than any anger. Not just of the system, but of your own perception, your own integrity. Your career, built on a foundation of lies. And the current crimes? The disappearances? The bodies? Loose ends, Elias stated, his voice flat. Just like Sterling, people who got too close, people who understood what they saw on these screens. He gestured vaguely at the silent terminals around them. We've been building a ghost market, Cole. Off-book, untraceable. A way to move billions, to control the flow of capital without any oversight. The pension funds were just the first largest test. The perfect cover for our liquidity. You clenched your fists. You killed people to fund your ghost market. Faster than you expected from a man of his age, he lunged, not at you, but at a discarded network cable snaking across the floor. He yanked it, sending a stack of old server manuals toppling from a nearby cart. The clang echoed through the cavernous space. He moved with a practiced efficiency, a man used to getting his way. You braced yourself, your years of training kicking in. This wasn't just an intellectual battle anymore. This was a fight for your life, for the truth that you now held. Merrick feinted left, then swung a surprisingly powerful right hook. You ducked, the air whistling past your ear, and came up with an elbow aimed at his midsection. He grunted, stumbling back, but Elias was already circling, a heavy metal paperweight now clutched in his hand. The trading floor, once a place of bustling commerce, was now a dangerous labyrinth of desks and dead screens. You backed away, scanning for an opening, a weapon, anything. You won't get away with this, you gasped, ducking under another wild swing from Elias, the paperweight narrowly missing your head. Merrick, recovering, advanced again. We already have, Cole, for years. The only difference now is that you know, and knowing in our world is a fatal condition. He lunged, driving you back towards a row of inactive terminals. The truth was out, but it might just be the last thing you ever learned. We already have, Cole, a stark image of a man who had walked through fire and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably changed. The first responders arrived with a calculated precision that spoke volumes. Not a frantic scramble, but a measured deployment of resources, as if they'd been waiting for the signal. Uniformed officers secured the perimeter, their movements economical, their faces grim. You watched them move, a detached observer in the very drama you'd ignited. They found the evidence quickly, precisely where you'd ensured it would be. The encrypted files, the hidden ledgers, the coded communications. All the threads you'd painstakingly unraveled, now laid bare for the world to see. The conspirators, caught in the dragnet you'd cast, were identified with swift clinical efficiency. The network, vast and insidious, began to crumble, its foundations exposed to the harsh light of justice. Your part in it, however, was far from celebrated. You were an asset, yes, but a rogue one. A woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind approached you as the last of the conspirators were led away, their expressions a mixture of fury and defeat. She didn't offer praise. She offered a look of weary understanding. You knew the risks, Cole, she stated, her voice low, for your ears only. And you went beyond them, far beyond. You nodded, the words unnecessary. You'd broken every protocol, sidestepped every regulation, and crossed lines you knew were meant to be sacrosanct. The professional reckoning was swift and uncompromising. Hours melted into a blur of interrogations, debriefings, and formal statements. You recounted every step, every suspicion, every desperate gamble. You laid bare the extent of the conspiracy, the years it had been operating, the lives it had consumed, including, implicitly, the one that had driven you to this point. The questions were pointed, designed to dissect your motives, to find the cracks in your story, to justify your insubordination. Why did you go it alone? Why did you keep critical information from your superiors? Why did you push when others had given up? By the time the sun began to paint the sky with bruised purples and grays, you were exhausted, stripped bare of all pretense. The official pronouncement came, delivered by a stern-faced superior. Immediate suspension, pending a full internal review. Your badge, your weapon, your access, all taken. You were an outsider again, but this time, by decree. Walking out of the building, the early morning air felt alien on your skin. The city, slowly waking, seemed indifferent to the seismic shift that had just occurred within its concrete heart. The professional fallout was a bitter pill, but it was overshadowed by a more profound internal tremor. You found yourself back on the trading floor, the forensic team still at work, but the immediate chaos had subsided. You walked among the dead screens, each one a tombstone for a lie. Merrick's words played again, not as a taunt, but as a confirmation. For years. The closure wasn't a sudden, blinding light, but a slow, dawning realization. You finally understood the true scale of what you had been up against, and in understanding, you felt a release. The emotional toll hit you then, a delayed impact. The adrenaline, which had coursed through your veins for weeks, evaporated, leaving behind a profound weariness. You had pushed yourself to the brink, driven by a ghost, by a need for answers that went beyond professional duty. And you had found them. The past, the one that had gnawed at you, the one that had set you on this relentless path, finally felt quiet. The echoes of old betrayals, the unanswered questions that had haunted your sleep, began to recede. The world hadn't become a perfect place, and the fight wasn't over, not truly. But your fight, the one for a specific truth, for a specific justice, had reached its conclusion. The professional consequences would be severe, perhaps career-ending. The personal cost had been immense, but the reckoning had come. And in the quiet aftermath, you felt a strange, fragile peace settle over you. A peace born not of victory, but of knowing. You knew. And that, as Merrick had said, changed everything. You stood there, alone in the vast, silent hall, the first rays of morning light barely touching the high windows. The professional consequences would be severe. The rulebook, a Bible for some, had been shredded in your pursuit of a truth that wouldn't fit neatly into any precinct folder. You'd gone rogue, crossed lines, and in doing so, had exposed a rot that went deeper than anyone had dared to imagine. The screens on the trading floor remained dead, reflecting the pale, nascent light like so many blank eyes. Your badge, still clipped to your belt, felt like a lead weight. You hadn't earned a commendation. You'd earned a reckoning. Hours later, the summons came. Not a call, but a quiet, almost apologetic knock on the precinct door you hadn't left since the last arrests were processed. The chief of detectives, a man whose face usually bore the etched lines of 1,000 compromises, looked uncharacteristically weary. He didn't invite you to sit. He just handed you an envelope. "Internal Affairs Report," he said, his voice flat. "And the board's decision." Your fingers trembled slightly as you took it. This was it, the culmination of everything. You opened it, scanning the pages. Gross insubordination, unsanctioned operations, damage to departmental reputation. Your heart sank, but a part of you had already braced for this. Then you saw the last paragraph. Given the extraordinary circumstances, the depth of the corruption uncovered, and the ultimate, albeit unorthodox, success in dismantling a significant criminal enterprise, the board has decided against immediate termination. However, a 6-month suspension without pay is mandated, effective immediately. Following this, You will be reassigned to a newly formed specialized unit focusing on deep cover, long-term investigations, operating with enhanced autonomy but under stringent oversight. This will be your last chance, Cole. Prove you can work within the framework, even if you sometimes have to stretch its boundaries. You read it twice, 3 times. Suspension, reassignment, enhanced autonomy. It wasn't dismissal. It wasn't even a demotion to desk duty. It was a tightrope, but it was a path forward, a chance, a new purpose forged in the ashes of your old one. They're giving you a leash, Cole, the chief of detectives said, observing your reaction. A very long leash, but a leash nonetheless. Don't mistake it for freedom. It's responsibility, the kind you earned the hard way. He paused, a flicker of something almost like respect in his eyes. The city needed what you did, but the department needs you to do it smarter next time. You nodded, the weight on your chest easing, replaced by a different kind of burden, the weight of expectation, of a second chance you hadn't truly believed you'd get. The city, meanwhile, began its slow, arduous process of healing. The arrests had sent shockwaves through the underbelly, leaving a power vacuum that was quickly being filled by more legitimate, or at least less overtly destructive, forces. Trust in the institutions, though still fragile, was slowly being rebuilt. The public, initially outraged by the revelations, now saw a glimmer of hope. A sign that the system, however flawed, could still purge its own poisons. The headlines shifted from scandal to reconstruction, from fear to cautious optimism. During your suspension, you didn't just sit idly. You walked the streets, not but as an observer. You saw the subtle shifts, fewer desperate faces on the corners, a tentative reopening of businesses that had shuttered in fear, a quiet hum of resilience returning to the city's veins. You spent hours in the library, not on case files, but on the history of justice, the philosophy of law, the psychology of corruption. You sought to understand why you had broken the rules, not just that you had. You sought a deeper foundation for the new understanding of justice the board had hinted at. When the 6 months were up, you reported to a nondescript office in an unmarked building. Your new team was small, hand-picked, and every member had a history of bending, if not breaking, the rules for the right reasons. There were no flashing lights, no public accolades. Just quiet, persistent work. You were given cases that were too complex, too politically sensitive, too deeply buried for the regular channels. You were different now. The fire that had driven you to reckless extremes was still there, but it was tempered by a newfound patience, a strategic depth. You understood that sometimes the slowest path was the most direct. You still sought the truth with an unyielding ferocity, but you now understood the immense responsibility that came with wielding it. Walking through the city streets, you were just another face in the crowd. No uniform, no badge openly displayed. But beneath the surface, you carried the weight of your past, the lessons of your fall, and the quiet resolve of your redemption. The scars were permanent, etched into your soul, a constant reminder of the price of uncovering the truth. But they were also badges of a different kind, symbols of a purpose renewed, a commitment to a justice that was messy, imperfect, but profoundly necessary. You were forever changed, but in that change, you had finally found your peace. Your future wasn't a pristine path, but a vital one, woven into the very fabric of the city's ongoing struggle for light.